Good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of The Week That Was. My name is Saeed Khan, hosting a robust conversation, to be sure, with another week where a lot has been going on. We are joined today with veteran investigative reporter and host of the No BS News Hour, Charlie LeDuff. We have ex-federal prosecutor who prosecuted former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, Michael Bullotta. And of course, we have co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. Welcome to you all. So let's go ahead and get started with the man and his Corvette and what it might be behind it. President Joe Biden and his relatively secure garage, depending on the reports you read. The whole idea about classified documents, who had access to them, what are they, and whether or not this is simply Trump on the Democratic side. What is the latest on
I
this?
have a little, let me play this real quick video.
Allan's got a video clip.
Little humor here.
What a penis head.
It's a travesty. Biden lied to the American people and weaponized the Justice Department, or as I call it, the Injustice Department.
Good one.
The difference is that while I did everything right, I did nothing wrong. Biden did everything wrong.
I mean, I guess we could ask the question, is there anybody home there, but is there anybody in the building listening to the man in orange? So not surprising that that Trump is saying this, and apparently the latest is that he's beseeching Meta to be allowed back onto Facebook and Instagram and other social media sites. First, on the legal side, is this something that's going to have legs? Is this going to have legal implications for the president?
I'll jump in on that one. So here's the huge difference between what we're seeing unfold with Joe Biden and what happened with Donald Trump, and that is with the first example with Trump, there were specific classified documents that were identified as missing, and the National Archives reached out to Trump's people and said, we'd like those back. And Trump said, either no, or we don't have them. And so they forced an FBI search warrant to be executed at Mar-a-Lago, and those documents were retrieved. And then while that was happening, one of the lawyers said, you got all the documents, signed an affidavit to that effect, and then they found more. So, and with Biden, you have some documents that get discovered. Somehow CBS got wind of it at the University of Pennsylvania offices of Biden. And those documents, once they were located, the Biden administration cooperated, they were returned. The Corvette documents in the garage, locked or not, were located, and it was all about just turning that stuff back over. So it all goes to intent, which is Trump appears to have intended to keep the documents and not wanting to give them back, forcing the use of a tool used in criminal cases. So it automatically got the flavor of a criminal investigation. Whereas Biden, and we all see his press conferences, and when he tries to sing happy birthday to somebody who doesn't know their name, that we see all that. And so we think, whoops, this is a whoops. So one is a whoops. Second one's a whoops. The other is, it looks more like a typical intentional crime. But the thing about it is, even with that distinction, I think it's going to make it much harder for the Democrats to use Trump's crimes, if they were crimes, against him.
How about the Justice Department? I mean, how much does you hear people say, oh, this is going to ruin the Justice Department's case, even obstruction with Trump in the Mar-a-Lago case? Is that something discussed over at Justice, where they say, oh, the optics are bad, now Biden's got the documents? Is it going to undermine their investigation?
I don't think it'll undermine it. I think that topic will be a discussion before indicting Trump, if that's where it goes. And the discussion will be something along the lines of, well, we might have a jury issue with the fact that, on the one hand, Biden was not charged and Trump was charged. So that would fuel the fire of jurors who were already predisposed to Trump. So it'll make it harder probably to get a conviction. It'll be discussed, but I don't think it'll derail the investigation of Trump.
No, I mean on the point that maybe the Democrats might not be able to use this with the kind of fervor that they were expecting or maybe hoping. I mean, isn't it like saying, well, you can't use your 4-iron, but you can use the other 13 clubs in your bag, all the other possible indictments and possible criminal action that Trump had. Charlie, I'm sure that the optics aren't great. I mean, here you've got the Penn Biden Center and documents were found there. And the reporting is, of course, trying to link Biden with China, which was a donor to the center. Hunter Biden also involved. Now there's reporting that he stayed in fact, quarantined at the house in Delaware where he could have had access. I'm sure the next report is going to say, well, see, this is how China comes in because it was a little red Corvette, red China. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going to come up. How do you see the politics and how do you see the media in this one?
To be honest with you, I don't have cable. So I've just learned in this era now, especially anything tangentially around Trump, I take a breath, I go for a run, I come back, it's something else. Again, someone tell me what the files are. Like, you know what I mean? Is there something to do with Iran? Is there something to do with Ukraine? Remember when Trump, the FBI swooped in and took the files out of Mar-a-Lago? It was going to be about nuclear secrets, perhaps. So to me, it's all just performative. It's a show. What's going to happen? I don't know, man. You tell me. Let me ask you this, Michael. Should I take this seriously? Is this like a story I should really be in on? Or is it election year? Is Trump really going to get indicted? Would it really go to trial?
I think that a smart move, given all those other clubs in the bag or other potential indictments, there's so much fertile ground. And the one that I come to initially, like immediately, is his involvement in the January 6th insurrection. And I believe that right now there's probably enough evidence to indict him for obstructing an official an official proceeding. That is the certification of the votes. So that's already there. It's in the chamber. And,
I meant the Mar-a-Lago stuff. I mean, are they really going to bring charges and drag him into court?
If I were involved in the case, my position would be, let's look at all of because it'll be the federal government that's looking at that potential charge. So so you would be looking at all the potential federal charges, and you probably would say that charge is either a throw-on, add-on charge to the indictment, or you just skip it because there's so much other information. And maybe you wouldn't have skipped it before Biden. Maybe that pushes this potential charge for the classified documents down to the not the back burner, but the other stove in the basement.
Right.
So does this just expose something that the American public really wasn't privy to, or perhaps had certain presumptions about, that classified documents do get lost in the shuffle when you have transitions from one administration to the other, some of which could be innocuous, some of which could be a little bit less than benign?
Yeah. Well, that goes to Charlie's point, which is a great one. It's like, the media wants you to be outraged about this stuff, but we don't know what it was. Like, was it some document that just was classified because it involved, some kind of overseas informant that now is outed and it doesn't even matter anymore? Is it who knows what it is? It could be any number of things. And, they also I don't think they told us the level of classification. So it also depends on what the level of classification is. If it's top secret versus, super top secret, for lack of a better, without telling you the classifications, but it really depends on what it is.
Yeah, I think we're learning how sloppy the the process is, and that they have to tighten it up. There definitely needs to be some changes when they're like laying around people's offices and they're shipping them out when they're leaving the White House, whatever. I mean, it was interesting. Trump, people are saying, why don't they raid the White House? Well, the White House is one place where classified documents can be. But even then, they say you're supposed to read it in the room, the skiff or whatever. You know, so there's got to be a better way. I mean, it's kind of shocking, but look, things get leaked. When I was in Washington, I was working for Jack Anderson. I was doing an internship with a columnist there, and you know, people got classified documents. People would ask for copies. You know, reporters would say, "Hey, can you get me a copy?" There was one guy who ended up being a rogue reporter there who would ask people, and I mentioned this last week. He'd be talking to someone and say, "Hey, is there a document on that?" And they go, "Well, no." He says, "Well, can you type up something and can you stamp it classified or whatever so I can say I've got a classified document?" So there's probably a little bit of looseness in terms of classifications, but some stuff is clearly highly, you know, top secret, whatever. But there's a little bit of a looseness there, even in the classifications.
Well, I guess back in the Watergate era, there must have been the way you told an original from a copy was if it smelled like the mimeograph. You know, that stuff that when you were in school you smelled and you kind of got a little bit loopy. But you mentioned the word, Alan, you mentioned leaks. So I thought maybe we would just go ahead and pull an audible here with news that came down yesterday about the Supreme Court regarding the alleged leak of the draft opinion regarding Dobbs over the summer, the case which effectively overturned Roe v. Wade. And the Supreme Court has announced that they're no closer in being able to solve the mystery as to who served the leak. And of course, that didn't take long for social media to go crazy to say, well, they know, and here's who it might be. Colonel Mustard with the lead pipe in the library, i.e., Ginny Thomas at home from Clarence Thomas. I mean, that's one scenario that's being proffered. Will we ever know? And what does this do to the confidence that people have regarding the Supreme Court?
You know, my experience has been in Washington generally, and maybe Michael and Charlie might weigh in on this, but my experience was like when there were leaks, sometimes in big stories where the defense attorneys would be getting really angry with justice, saying, "There's leaks coming out, you guys need to investigate," and they'd say, "Okay," but they only tried so hard. I felt like they didn't really want to find out. So they would do an investigation and they would come up saying, "We can't find the leak." Pat Fitzgerald, the U.S. attorney out of Chicago, who was brought into Washington to find leaks and all that, he found them. I think if you really, it depends on the level of aggressiveness. It depends on, you know, doing polygraphs for FBI agents, doing, you know, subpoenaing people, getting records and stuff like that. It depends how deep a dive. And it seems like in this case, the Supreme Court really kind of wanted to know, but kind of didn't want to know who it was. And maybe they did know and decided we don't want to know, you know.
If you had to speculate, I'm going to go around the horn here. Who do you think it was, or from? Let's even put it to say which justice's office.
I don't know. I'd say it was a clerk, but I don't know who. I don't have that guess, but I have to second Alan's comment there. You just didn't want to embarrass the court. It's a contained atmosphere with only so many people with their hands on the document, which begs the question, who even investigated that? I'm not quite sure, but let's look at the Secret Service. Biden spends 150 days of his presidency in Delaware. You don't have a list who went to the house. Somebody breaks into Pelosi's house and you don't have any videotape and somebody went off to get a cup of coffee. You know, you don't really want to know. And I just, as a regular person, I feel you don't want us to know. And I don't like that because reporters go to jail all the time. Give up your source.
I'm still coming to terms with the fact that you don't have cable, but I'll get over that soon.
It's called streaming, bro. Streaming.
Soon enough. Well, sticking to Washington, the other big news, of course, is that the United States has now surpassed the debt ceiling. We're somewhere along the lines of $31 trillion with a capital T and climbing. It seems as though talks have stalled between the White House and Capitol Hill on raising the debt ceiling. There's been a lot of reportage about whether or not this should just simply be pro forma. We know that we're not going to be able to bring spending under any kind of reasonable containment. So, let's just go ahead and do what we always do and raise the ceiling. This time, it seems as though others have a different idea. Of course, this is a certain amount of political posturing. I suppose the question then becomes, how long do you think this will last, and what will be the consequences?
It's a shame that, I mean, when Trump was in office, I don't think there was ever an issue of it. The Congress didn't want to embarrass him. It's always, I mean, look, no one likes debt. That is horrible, but it's a part of the reality is that we've really kind of let go of the idea that we can balance our budget at this point. And it's not an option, really. It's really an option of them trying to say, okay, let's cut Social Security. The Republicans now want to raise the age for getting Social Security and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. That's
So we see something like this happening in France, where President Emmanuel Macron has sought to up the retirement age from 62 to 64, and people are out on the streets, and it's getting a little bit violent in Old Paris. So, Charlie, how do you see this playing out when it comes to the politics of debt ceiling negotiation?
Well, they'll get it done, and I mean, there's enough money floating around where you can stretch, government funding out to the summer, so you'll have high theater. But we are at a point. I mean, Allan makes a point about deficit spending. We're going to have to do something. It's charming that the Republicans want to do it now, because if you look at inflation and you look at printing money and there's nothing behind it, and now we're raising interest rates by 50 basis points every time the Fed meets, we're in a real bad spot. And this starts with George Bush. 3 tax cuts, deficit spending, 2 wars you didn't pay for. Barack Obama, $1 trillion deficit every year. Trump comes in, basically cuts taxes for the wealthy and runs $1 trillion deficits in a growth period. And then COVID comes and we've lost our mind. We've got a $5.8 trillion budget, $1.2 trillion debt this year, and there's no real budget. They don't even do budgets anymore. They do omnibus packages. They do funding over. There's no document anymore. We got to get the money under control, because this is different than France, because the world economy is based on our economy, on our dollar. And if there's no value to it and people aren't believing it, what's going to happen to the 401ks? What's going to happen to my savings? So again, it's theater, but I have no time for either party or any cable or TV, because they're not doing the work we need them to do to secure prosperity for our children.
So we've been here before, but in some ways we haven't. In the past, and let's see, I mean, we had Ronald Reagan, the oracle of neoliberalism, who really made deficit spending part of his mantra. But in those times when the dollar became so weak, it still remained the international currency, especially of commerce, because there really wasn't an alternative. Now it seems as though there are countries, some of which who are our allies, like Saudi Arabia, so to speak, that are in fact exploring trading and transacting oil and other commodities in a currency other than the US dollar. So with that possibility, I think, Charlie, things might be a little bit grimmer, would you say?
I don't know. I mean, do you trust the yuan? Do you trust the Chinese currency? I mean, look at the pound. They have fiscal problems and they have monetary problems. The whole world has just been living on debt, except maybe China, but I don't know what the future is there. I don't see the dollar being replaced. I can see the Saudis accepting rubles, right, or a rupee in order to get the fuel that they need, but or to the customers. India, I could see that, but I don't see the dollar losing its primacy.
Well,
I
I
think
mean,
we're
either
going to
that or
destroy it inside out.
yeah, I mean, they might accept rubles, rupees, or Ronaldo, apparently, who now is playing for a club out of Riyadh. So yeah, there you go. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can barter for these things. Well, the first head-to-head polls seem to be out between Trump and DeSantis, and it's actually not very close. It looks like Donald Trump has a sizable lead over the governor of Florida, that no matter what he does to distance himself from the Orange Man, no matter what he does in trying to appeal to the same base with nullifying critical race theory, getting rid of the AP testing in Florida from high school, it seems that DeSantis is not able to capture the national Republican and or conservative base, that it still seems to be Trump's party. Is it simply simply too early? Yeah. No.
I think it's too early. I think not enough people really know who Ron DeSantis is. Not everyone knows what the options are. I think, the hardcore Republicans, the base, are just saying, we want a Republican back in. We don't want Joe Biden. And interesting, this morning they were talking about on TV that Joe Biden's wife at this point is saying that she wants Joe to run again. Which is interesting, but I think it's too early. I mean, it's surprising considering the 2022 elections how poorly the Republicans fared, that you would think they're finally like, okay, Trump's a loser, we don't want him, he's bringing down the party. But there's obviously a loyal base, but I think it's way too early. I mean, it's early 2023. I mean, DeSantis has some work to do to get his name out there more. I think people have had the misconception that DeSantis is the guy, that he's way popular, that people in, Alabama and, New Mexico, Montana know who the guy is, and they know the name, but they don't really know who he is. And they know Trump. Trump's still the brand. I mean, Trump has spent his whole life marketing the Trump name, and it still apparently has some, cachet. So.
Well, what you have also this over just the last 48 hours is coverage of former Trump Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is apparently looking to throw his hat into the ring. He is now promoting his memoir, in which he wastes no time throwing under the bus the former ambassador to the United Nations under Trump, former governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, saying how she had apparently been plotting a cabal with former first daughter Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner to try to persuade Trump to name her vice presidential nominee for 2020. The other nugget I thought that was pretty hilarious in Pompeo's memoir, from just reading the excerpts, was that Trump wanted Pompeo to serve simultaneously as Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. Not sure how that one works, but it clearly seems as though others are feeling emboldened to at least nudge their way into the conversation about being the Republican nominee. Is this because they feel as though DeSantis is not the front runner, and at the same time they're a little bit skittish on whether Trump will be able to be anywhere on the track starting 2024? Thoughts?
Well, there's always ego. That's one reason people seek the big chair, right? But I looked up the poll, and I think I didn't write notes down, but at the same time, those 700 Republicans or whatever that they polled believe that in a head-to-head matchup that DeSantis would beat Biden, but they believe Biden would beat Trump. Is that correct? I think that is.
I think that is, yeah.
So look at that. I mean, even they know that you got to clear the primary, and then there's a general election. And when Allan said the Republicans did poorly this time around, okay, I mean, they took the House, but they didn't do as well as people thought because Biden's administration is horrible. But even Republicans know if you put Biden's horrible administration up against what we remember about Trump, independents like this, like we saw in Michigan, like we saw in Pennsylvania, we're not going for that crackpot, far right, nonsensical, the election was stolen kind of crowd. Like, we're done with it. So either it's too early for DeSantis or 4 more years, man. That if I really got to workshop it right now, I would say Trump, Biden wins it.
What about the strategy that the Democrats should try to persuade the American public that this is no longer the party of Trump, it's the party not of even of DeSantis, but it's the party of George Santos?
Okay, speaking of that, let's run this little video.
His lies have been so numerous and fantastical, it's impossible to keep track. He even lied about being a college volleyball star, which the chair of the Nassau County Republican Party revealed in a press conference last week where he called on Santos to resign, causing the other Republican assembled behind him to laugh at how absurd it was.
Told me, I remember specifically, I'm into sports a little bit, that he was a star on the volleyball team and that they won the league championship. What can I tell you?
You gotta love New York politics. Even our leaders address damning scandals like they're doing a one-man show at Caroline's. He told me his mother was Italian, his father was Jewish, and he was in therapy. What can I tell you?
Oh, boy. Apparently his mother was not in the World Trade Center on 9/11. There's a good chance she wasn't anywhere in New York City, or for that matter, even in the country on 9/11. So forget about dying at 9/11. She of course then died some years later. No causation at all. I'm speechless that this actually is even considered acceptable. But there you go. Well, we have something
it's
more.
a gift. Yeah. It's a gift to the Democrats. I mean, it's like the Republicans are so embarrassed by it, and yet McCarthy won't get rid of him because he needs his vote, and so it's a conundrum for them. In the same way that I think Trump is a liability to the party at this point. But I mean, Trump is, as I said last week, Trump's going to sink the party. Look, this group, Pompeo. Probably Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, the knives are going to be out. And there is going to be a lot of filleting going on back and forth. And at the end, Trump is going to say, if he doesn't get the nomination, he's going to be so wounded, he's going to run as an independent. And there's no way a Republican can win if he runs as an independent.
I didn't even think of that. That's pretty astute. You're right.
So,
but I used to live in Queens. And I covered Long Island, so I'm going to tell you about Santos, or if that's even his name. I don't think it's his name.
Right.
But, 2 years is an term, a year, because you got to campaign for the second part of your term as a congressperson. Couple of good votes out of Santos or Jimmy Crack Corn or whatever his name is. And I'm telling you, Queens and Long Island be like, he votes the right way. No, whatever. Regular guy.
Well, apparently, Charlie, you're right. I mean, George Santos is only one of his names. The other allegation is that he screwed over a homeless veteran who was trying to get crowdfunding for his dog. Used a different name. In fact, used, I think, his mother's maiden name. And yet, here is my favorite nom de guerre that he's been using. When he was in Brazil, apparently Santos also had a bit of a career as a drag queen. So we got to figure out what the name is on that one, because maybe that needs to be in the Rayburn building of the House of Representatives, in case people aren't familiar with George Santos. But I think it brings up a very important question that now people are wondering if he's even a U.S. citizen. We really don't know where the bottom lies in his rather ambiguous identity. So
but he still checks the conservative box, because they say, okay, sure, I did some drag queening, but I never taught school.
Yeah, he's like the Republicans' Herschel Walker all over again. They need him.
You mean Michael? He's the Republicans' other Herschel Walker.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, you would think that, and I know this is being very naive, that an easy solution for this would be for McCarthy to pick up the phone and contact the governor of New York, Hochul, who happens to be a Democrat, and say, look, let's get rid of this guy, and why don't you just appoint a moderate Democrat? Doesn't have to be even somebody ideologically bound. I'd say that would solve the problem for 2 years. Anyone? Any takers?
Well, did
No?
McCarthy just give away? He just gave away the store to the, the right wing of the party. So, if you're going to get rid of a vote and have McCarthy put in a liberal Democrat, well, isn't it the deal he made? One person can call for a vote of confidence.
Yep.
Okay. Well, there you go. So he can't do that.
So we got that. We also have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar from Arizona on the House Homeland Security Committee. So I'm sure that they're going to object to the broader construction of defining domestic terrorists to include, well, one would suspect some people who might have voted for them. So stay tuned on that. Now, I know, Alan, we've got another video coming up here. We got Maureen saying, George Santos, you just can't make this stuff up. Truth is so much stranger than fiction. Yes, it is, Maureen. We've got some issues here in Detroit. Alan, I believe
All
you
right,
have
we're
a
going
good...
to play a little clip here.
Heck, he's waving around the latest fantastical watercolors again. And local business leaders are barking with approval like seals to the sardine. And clearly, this group of downtown Republican business people and the Democratic politicians are all suffering from mathematical dyslexia and collective amnesia. Because here's the latest proposal for another measly $800 million. That's not even including the interest. And don't forget the other $100 million that Gretsch gave them last month. All this public cash and prizes. Ilitch promises to finish that gleaming city within the city, complete with low-income housing. It's great. Why don't we just build them their own houses? We get shops, we get restaurants, and wait for this one, new office space that nobody in America wants anymore. You guys remember COVID? Remember Zoom?
Yeah, there's so much office. There's a lack of office space downtown.
Dude, that's a loser. Yeah. That's what a skyscraper we paid for now.
That is a preface. I should have prefaced by saying Charlie's talking about Chris Ilitch's proposal.
So Charlie, yes. Chris
I want to know why Charlie is acting so differently right now. He seems so sedate. You get that other Charlie?
Not my show, bro.
We have no issues with emotiveness and histrionics here at The Week That Was, Charlie. So the Ilitch Project and Detroit taxpayers, what is going on in the Motor City?
Okay, let's do it. This is garbage. Oh, and I think a woman named Michelle said my mic's cracking. I apologize.
Yeah. I've been working on it. It's good right now.
Okay, look, this guy, this daddy's boy. You came to us and you asked the taxpayers to build you a hockey arena where you don't share one nickel of the hot dogs or the jerseys or the tickets or the parking. And if you give that to him, he promised we're going to have a city within a city. And he never did it. He never did it. In fact, they siphon money from the libraries. They siphon money from the schools. They siphon money from their competitors in that downtown district. Everybody's taxes go up to pay for his stuff. It's outrageous. So what do we got now? 6-7 years later, I am going to build it. But this time I'm going to need another $900 million out of you. There's two ways to do this. Capitalism, where you, Mr. Billionaire, who's been sucking off the public for years, you put up the principal, you put up the capital, you take the risk. If it works out, you make profit. Or there's another thing we can do. If we're going to build housing and office space and all this with the public's money, why isn't it a public work? It'd be like a housing project. I hire the construction crew, but I run it. I charge the rent. I fix it. It's a public good. Why are we creating this Frankenstein of giving away precious dollars in the city that went bankrupt? And if you really look at its books, it's on the verge again.
I think it's interesting. I think people accept, or they they just assume that every project, every stadium, every arena in the country gets funded public money. We saw $1.4 billion arena in San Francisco where the Golden State Warriors play. The city of San Francisco refused to put any money in. It was totally privately financed through that whole area there. And, we saw the Palace. Back then, it was a $90 million project, but the Palace was built with private money. The Ilitch is, the sad part of the Ilitch is the city built the Joe for them. They were paying rent. They were supposed to pay TV revenue, and during the bankruptcy, I think they owed about $80 million in TV revenue. Their lawyers went to work and tried to undercut the contract and find little clauses in there, and they ripped the city off of probably $80 million right there, not to mention some other aspects that they ripped off. So it's not, and Charlie was riffing about this on a show. You go by there and all there are parking lots. It's suppressed. The guy Harry's, who owns Harry's Bar, he bought the place, I think, in '94. He said, this is going to be the new entertainment district for Detroit. And he said, instead, he saw it decline, get worse and worse, and more drug dealings going on, and just more blight. And it ended up that the Ilitches were suppressing it so they could buy properties cheap. And they still have suppressed that area. That whole area should be just totally built up. And it still has the remnants of kind of Skid Row.
And if you look, you talked about sports arenas, but
whoops.
I think Charlie.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we're good.
Yep.
Sports arenas are one thing. Now we're getting into the business of skyscrapers with no guarantee that Hudson's thing hasn't grown an inch in 6 months. Special deals for the hotel, the book Cadillac, office towers, Amazon and the land. Everything here is being backed one way or another by working people, and working people can't see it. Look, if there's no demand, you shouldn't build it. If you hear the developers, there's no way we can do this without you guaranteeing me profit. Where does that work in the Western world?
Well, I think what's happened here for so long, Detroit had such a huge inferiority complex. Anybody wanted to build anything. It was like, here, take our money. Here, take the land, take this. But I think as we saw, the pandemic slowed things down. Detroit is a place you can make a lot of money. And the Ilitches have known that for a long time. Dan Gilbert has known that now. And so we don't have to be such paupers. We don't have to have such an inferiority complex where we're throwing money at projects. People should want to come in because they can make money without doing a big grab on the taxpayer money.
I agree with Allan. For so long, Detroit was it's like that guy who can't get a date, like kind of an incel, right? And then all of a sudden, we see an attractive lady. She comes in. She wants to shows us some watercolors. I'm like, yeah, we want to date her. Oh, but we have to pay the $300 million. But man, if we can get busy with her, shit, we're gonna put ourselves on the map. We'll be revitalized. We actually will have a renaissance. And that's how it's been. And so I hope you're right, Allan, that it is more attractive. But I agree with Charlie, since, because I've been working downtown Detroit for many years. Since the pandemic, it just hasn't been the same. The restaurants that used to be open for lunch are not. Businesses are not. It's not the way it was.
A lot has changed. Yeah.
So a lot's changed.
And how is it in the, you're in the Ford building. How is the occupancy there?
It's very low, and I don't want to say that too loudly. I know no one's listening to us because I don't want them to raise my rent. But
yeah, just go ahead and whisper.
Yeah, there's not that many people. I'm probably the only person on this floor today.
Look what Michael just said. Look what he said. Yeah. No one's there. The building's empty. What are they parading in front of us? Office space. Okay, for whom? For Ross? For Ilitch? Is it your business you're moving in? Oh, you're going to be a landlord. Here's the trick about these deals. Like Trump. All right, he wasn't paying taxes forever. When you're a developer, you build $1 billion building. The federal tax code allows you, and Michael, you probably know this, you're allowed to depreciate the building. Let's just give it a nominal number, 10% a year. So I put $1 billion into it. I tell the tax man next year it's worth $900 million. I get a write-off of $100 million. And if I don't take it, I get to save it. So the next year I get $200 million. So you get 10% for the development cost. You get your write-off. And if you happen to get a lawyer or two in there, you win. You don't have to pay the city, the county, or the state any property tax. So why would you build a Flying Dutchman? Because it's money right off the head tax-wise. So this isn't the best thing for us. We got a pension balloon problem coming up. $200 million a year for the next 15 years that we don't have. It's silliness.
So there's also the other thing, right? That I mean, the census has now shown that for the second consecutive year, Michigan's death rate has exceeded its birth rate. At the same time, the census has also shown that people are moving into the state. There's actually a net positive migration into the state. So those who are blaming people heading for the exit signs were actually wrong about this. But nonetheless, if we do have a higher death rate, particularly as one might presume from people who are earning in their golden years, what is that then going to mean for the tax base, not just of Detroit, but of Michigan as a state? What's it going to mean for services that can be provided? It seems as though we're reaching a demographic time bomb here.
We are.
Thoughts?
We are,
Yeah.
and the pensions are coming due. You're right. Retirement, pension. How are we gonna? It's the China problem, in a very small place where we live. I don't know, but I'm glad you raised it because I don't think we're thinking about it. And when you talk about population totals, we're still bottom 4. It's like us in Illinois and New York and California. People are getting gone. They're going to where it's warm and cheaper. So I don't know what we're going to do, Saeed. I really don't.
So basically, then, what the Ilitches should do with that land around LCA is zone it for cemeteries. Because I mean, if we are having this higher death rate, then it seems as though that's going to be one of the more lucrative sectors of the economy and industry coming up. I'm being partly flippant here, but I think that we do have to think about looking outside the box. And Michael, I fully agree with you. I mean, the idea then of the psychology of people from COVID. I know a lot of able-bodied people who are all vaxxed and boosted up who have kind of gotten acclimated to DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats and saying, you know what, we might as well just go ahead and stay in or order the food in. It works out better that the socialization has changed because now everyone has, relatively speaking, bigger screen TVs. It's more comfortable being at home. Just ask any movie theater and the way that they roll out movies. In England, the same thing has happened, that the pub culture is being decimated because for the price of 2 pints at your local, you can buy an entire case down at Tesco. So it comes down to simple math. The only thing that you have to worry about is the price of eggs, of course. And now you're having people who are actually breeding chickens in their backyards, including Hamtramck, where apparently you can also then have an animal sacrifice in your backyard. So how about that for synthesizing a whole lot of news going on? Well,
can I just make an egg comment just because you mentioned eggs? My 5-year-old told me yesterday that he knows what came first, the chicken or the egg. He said definitely egg because dinosaurs were born with eggs before there were chickens. I thought that was amazing. I wanted to share that with your listeners.
All right.
How old is he, Michael?
He's 5.
He's absolutely right. The amniote egg predates the modern bird and the modern reptile, and of course the modern platypus. The only one of only 2 mammals that actually will go ahead and lay an egg. So speaking of laying an egg, I guess we can talk about Solomon Pena, the failed candidate in New Mexico, who has been charged with a plot of trying to shoot up homes of Democratic opponents. Pena has tried a couple of times to run for office, unsuccessful in all. Now we find that Albuquerque police have gone ahead and arrested him, and they believe that, in fact, he is the mastermind behind this conspiracy of hiring people to either, quote unquote, send a message or to do some real harm. We've really come now down to this, have we?
It's scary, Saeed. It's so scary.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is an outlier, but then as a former prosecutor and just a citizen of this country, I just wonder if this could possibly become something that's normalized, like school shootings or other things. You know, when you look at other countries, you know, I feel like we take for granted the normalization or the expectancy of things like the transfer of power with peaceful means, and you know, things like corruption cases. When I was speaking with other prosecutors around the world talking about corruption, they're shocked that we have independent agencies that investigate it. I mean, there are things that we take for granted in this country, like if you lose an election, you're not going to get, or you win an election, you're not going to get killed by your opponent. I mean, I just hope we don't turn into Mexico where prosecutors are killed, or Italy for that matter. And, you know, these types of things become more normal because some complete lunatic like Pena decided to go this route. So I'm just
well. Look at even Brazil, Michael. I mean, here you have outgoing, now outgone, President Jair Bolsonaro, who, of course, whenever somebody leaves office under disgrace in another country and losing an election, where do they come? Florida, and spending time in Orlando. But the reports of the trashing of the presidential palace and other government buildings in Brasilia by his quote-unquote supporters when they had a kind of post-factum insurrection of their own was mirrored only by the reports of how he himself had trashed the presidential palace. So, I mean, is nothing politically sacred anymore around the world? I mean, are we just going through a moment, a wormhole, hoping that maybe on the other side there will be a reversal?
I think, you know what, I think we don't even realize how crazy things are here sometimes. When I was in Israel, just back in November and December, one day there was a double bombing in Jerusalem, and ended up 2 people died, more than 20 people were wounded, and I had people calling from Michigan, from Detroit, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Are you okay?" I said, you know, you're back. There was, and that day, I think that day or sometime around, there was a mass shooting at a Walmart in Virginia. People don't realize that the world is looking in at the U.S. and seeing shootings at schools, supermarkets, and they're saying, "What the fuck is going on in America?" And we're just like looking outward and saying, "Oh my gosh, look at, there was a terrorist attack here or there." Things are out of control, and Michael's right to think that perhaps, you know, you start having the copycats. I mean, the school shootings, you know, I guess the first one really that I can recall at Columbine, and since then, look how many shootings we've had.
I mean, not everyone can be like the Japanese, Alan, that when they lose a match at the World Cup, the fans clean the stadium and the players clean the locker room. I mean, I don't know if you're expecting that to happen the next time you go to the big house for a football game and cleaning up all the debris. So speaking of U of M, seems as though there has been the possibility of a cyber crime on campus. Matt Weiss, the co-offensive coordinator for the football team, one that it looks like Jim Harbaugh will be coaching next year, has been placed on leave while the university investigates a complaint that was made that in the practice facility building, Schembechler Hall, computer was accessed and information of a very private nature was accessed accordingly. I think what they're talking about is someone got into somebody's email account. Again, it seems just completely outlandish that this stuff is happening at institutions all around us.
But what is the rest of the story, though? So you need like that. This is like an incomplete story. This is It's like man kills other man. Well, why? Like, what happened? What is he doing on a computer? What is he?
Michael, if I had the answer, I'd be wearing a khaki overcoat and probably smoking a cigar, and I'd be driving a really beat up Volvo, and I'd be saying, just one more thing. That's
so
my
now we
best
know
hope.
what your hopes and dreams are. Thanks for sharing that.
Of being Columbo.
Columbo, right?
I mean, there
old
you
school
go.
reference.
I'm glad you asked that, Michael, because I was like, I don't have cable, man. I don't know what's going on with this.
Charlie, that's why
They're always talking about stuff I don't know about.
Charlie, that's why I threw that out there, because that was something that actually you could watch on a TV that had a UHF and a VHF dial and rabbit ear antenna.
But I read the story, and I'm still left wondering, like Michael, like what the fuck is going on with it? I don't understand.
It's got to be like something about a relationship. It's got to be a boy and girl thing. I mean, right? Or boy and boy or whatever. It has to be a relationship.
It's interesting with privacy when we talk about privacy with emails. When I worked at the Washington Post, we were told, management could look in your company emails if they wanted to, which I always found really outrageous. So occasionally I'd write an email to somebody saying how amazing I thought an editor was, just in case they were looking.
Well, in this day and age too, like you may inadvertently, but you do conduct business over your personal email, right? You have your work email, you have and so one time my corporation in a legal dispute with another party came in and took a forensic photograph of my private email account in case there was business. So it was like you cordoned off my office. You put the crime tape up and you started rifling through the files and taking pictures. I felt so violated.
Yeah.
So when I read some about email, I'm curious. But again, maybe that's part of it. When you talk about copycats, and the world is insane. It's on the move like never before. Digitization, mass migration, globalization, but maybe part of it is these ubiquitous screens and the information piecemeals coming at you and driving you crazy. So for as much information that we have nowadays, I don't find people to be more and better informed.
Well, here you go, Michael. This is just coming across on my computer, and I don't know how authentic this is, but it seems as though the motive for the suspect was to try to get past the paywall to read one of Charlie's articles. So that explains a lot. Okay,
it's $1 for 6 months. Come on.
All right, Alan, I think it's that time of the show.
All righty.
Downtown Detroit, Robert Wells, Smart of the Week.
Okay.
I know that guy. That guy's my valet guy.
Yeah, Robert's the man. I call him the mayor of Griswold.
Mayor of Griswold. Okay, well, Shrug of the Week. Michael, do you have one for us?
I always have one. So, because I guess I'm a criminal defense attorney, I probably was eventually going to make my schmuck a true crime schmuck. So, here's my guy. So my guy was studying. He was a candidate for a doctorate in criminology, and he was learning all about how studying all kinds of famous crimes. And when it came time for him to live out his fantasy and stab 4 people to death, he learned nothing apparently from all of his studies. And it's a really bad ad for the University of Washington State University, because of course I'm talking about Brian Koberger, the murder of those 4 young, lovely students in Idaho. And he was someone who, he's studying criminology, he's studying the cases, and he makes every single possible mistake, starting with the most obvious one. And I don't mean to be a murder, consultant to help people murder people, but this guy turned his phone off only once in his life, and that was during the time that he was killing those poor people. Right. He kept his phone on when he made 12 trips to stalk the house. I mean, he just did all these horrible things. And I will just say this about that Leopold and Loeb 100 years ago, did it much better. And they used a chisel. And if it wasn't for Leopold's glasses being left at the scene that had his prescription, and then the cops went to the town optometrist, and he said, "Oh, I know that prescription. It's Leopold." So I don't know. He's a total schmuck. Of course, he's a murderer. I'm burying the lead, but schmuck nonetheless. Thank you.
Very good. All right, Charlie, who's your schmuck of the week?
Well, I could go with Chris Ilitch, but I think last time I was on, I did Chris Ilitch. I could go Genaro Garcia Luna, the former head of the Mexican FBI, who is now on trial in federal court in Brooklyn for helping the drug cartel smuggle drugs when he was supposed to be capturing them. But I won't. I'm going to go with pop culture, and I'm going to say Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin is the schmuck of the week. Okay, bro, I think they're overcharging a little bit here because of your name, but you don't have to go on social media, you and your wife, talking about how you love each other and there's a woman that's dead here. You didn't have to go on Stephanopoulos and give the old, "I'm not responsible. I didn't pull the trigger." And then they call the FBI, and absolutely he pulled the trigger. You're a schmuck, Alec. Shut your mouth. Call Michael. Get yourself a good attorney and shut the fuck up.
I wonder if the prosecutors are going to show a clip of him as Jack Ryan to show that he knew his way around a gun. Because last time I saw The Hunt for Red October, he seemed to be somewhat adept at it. Not to blow the plot for the movie. Okay, Alan.
I'm going to go with Jeff Bezos, owner of not only Amazon, but the Washington Post. People are freaking out at the Post. There's going to be layoffs, which, here's a guy who has so much money. At minimum, they could do voluntary layoffs where they say, when I left, they did voluntary layoffs. I think 130 people did it. I mean, they offered such a great deal: 1 year of salary, health care till 65. You could start collecting your pension immediately. And so he's got the money. They've shut down the magazine. They got rid of a lot of really talented people. They just laid them off. And now they're talking, down the road, we're still planning on hiring people. It's just a lousy way to run a newsroom. And in the same way, really, Gannett, which can't figure out the Rubik's Cube anymore with their publications, has, Peter Bhatia, the editor of the Free Press, has left, who is a pretty stand-up guy, which is hard to find in editors at Gannett who are stand-up like that. He left so he could save some jobs, and Brian Dickerson left. They've lost some talent there, and you can't keep shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and expecting your product to be good. So,
can I ask a quick question off that? I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pete leaves the Free Press to save some jobs, right?
Yep.
But they got to find a guy to do Pete's job. So how did he save any jobs?
Internal. They're somebody who's already on the payroll. They're gonna bring up. I think. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction. My schmuck of the week is a man by the name of John Harrell, who happens to be a football coach in Texas, whereas, of course, even before Buzz Buzzinger's Friday Night Lights is a religion unto itself. Harrell is a football coach at Rockwell Heath High School in suburban Dallas, and apparently has been the head coach for a year, been with the program since 2019. In an off-season workout session, he subjected students as a punishment, or football players, to 400 push-ups. That landed 8 of them in the hospital, including one who was literally peeing black, diagnosed with having rhabdomyolysis, which is a signal of breaking down muscle tissue and leading to potentially permanent kidney damage and kidney failure. This known because that student's mother happens to be a doctor herself. Well, he's been put on leave pending an investigation, and at a school board meeting, there were quite a few football players who showed up in his defense, saying he has been a father figure, and we don't see this as a punishment because that's how we roll. But with the exception of Top Gun Maverick, I'm not sure if I've seen punitive measures of push-ups in quite this caliber, and certainly not to minor children. By the way, last year, the football team under Harrell went 7-5, so maybe he should be doing some of those push-ups instead of the students. So because of that, John Harrell, you're my schmuck of the week.
Sad. What do you think about Louis Gossett Jr. telling Richard Gere to chop and give him 20 mayonnaise? Remember that? Officer.
Yeah, I do. I mean, that was
pretty bad.
That was 20. I think when he put him through the rigors for the whole weekend, and when he wouldn't accept his or when he was trying to get his DOR, that might have been good. But of course, there was that great scene where they tried to kick each other's ass in the boxing ring. So, a good movie by all. See, Mike, you know some of the references. And Charlie, you don't need cable to see Officer and a Gentleman. You can stream it.
I wrote it. I wrote that.
Wonderful.
I wrote.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for being on and being part of our audience as well for the week that was. Thank you, Charlie LeDuff. Thank you, Michael Bullotta. And of course, thank you, Allan Lengel, with the last word.
Drive home safely.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great week.